Thank you for joining us for the August meeting of the Commission to Combat Substance Use Disorder. The minutes were distributed to the members prior to the meeting. If there aren't any changes, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Motion seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. The minutes have been approved. Our recovery speaker today is John Cunningham from Recover Out Loud. I had the opportunity to visit them in Columbus and hear about their work. And so I wanted him to come and talk about his journey, but also the work that Recover Out Loud has done. And then we're going to follow that up with Lisa Hall, who is one of the producers from the Addicts Wake, at which John is featured in. So this morning is all about the Brown County, Columbus area. And so John?
All right, well, my name's John Cunningham, and I'm from Columbus, Indiana. And to give a brief background about my addiction, it doesn't look no different than anybody else's addiction. Back in 1995, I lost my father to a massive heart attack. He was 38 years old, and that's the first time I experienced loss. And I feel like most people that struggle with addiction came from pain, loss, or trauma in some way. It wasn't long after that I tried marijuana, and nothing happened. I had no consequences. I think a lot of times we think that consequences are immediate. For me, it was not. I didn't really suffer my first bit of consequences till I was about 24 years old, when my wife at the time decided she was going to file for divorce after I showed up to her dad's funeral high on opiates. Soon after that, I started trying to support my own habit through criminal ways. I started burglarizing houses, and in 2008, I was busted for the first time in Columbus, Indiana. At that time, they gave me 10 years, all suspended, and it didn't take long. In 2012, I was busted again for 2 more burglaries while being on probation for burglary. At this point in time, I thought for sure my life was over. I remember being in Bartholomew County Jail, and I got my first plea bargain of 30 years. The thing is, this time, when I looked at that piece of paper, there was not much excuses that came through my mind. Honestly, I realized I deserved every year they were going to give me, and I thought I was going to get it. But I also had this different thought that maybe I could use this time to actually get sober and stay sober for the rest of my life. That little bit of hope is what pulled me through the most difficult parts of my life. And the first thing I did in that county jail was I decided to look in the mirror, decide what I did not like about myself, and I went outside into the day room and I started doing exercises as a means to recover myself, to make small changes that I could see. Later that year in 2012, I faced the judge and I looked at him and I said, before you sentence me, sir, I deserve every single year that you're going to give me. And at that point in time, I received the biggest miracle of my life. He didn't give me all that time. I got 14 years, was 7 suspended, had 1 year in already, and I knew at that point in time that I was going to do all I could to give back to this community and not spit in this judge's face. Over the next 2 years, I did everything I could to change myself. I faced myself in ways I never had before, started getting on microphones like this in prison and speaking about change and what that meant to me. In 2014, I was finally released, and this is when my recovery journey really takes off. I knew I wanted to be around like-minded people, sober people, but my journey looked a little bit different than the traditional paths that had existed. So the first thing I did, I started going to AA meetings and NA meetings, and at first, they accepted me. I was 4 years clean at this point, and people started asking me to sponsor them. Unfortunately, AA and NA was not my path. I could not be a sponsor, and at this point, people started to be more interested in the fact, are you working steps? Why don't you have a sponsor? Are you really in recovery? And this did not set well with me. I remember I was asked in 2015 to speak at an NA conference. I had a higher up call me and asked me if I had a strong NA message. I said, no, I have a strong recovery message. At this point, they said I could not speak, and I realized if I did not do something, my voice was going to be taken, and this beautiful story of recovery I had was not going to be told. I also wondered who else out there was just like me. So in 2018, me and my best friend started talking, and I've been going on about 3 years at this point with no real sober connections, social media being my biggest outlet. So we decided to come up with this concept called Recover Out Loud. where there was no rules to the recovery path, where we just supported each other. No matter how you did it, you were going to be supported. It took off. We now serve in 6 different counties, Columbus being our major hub, and it's going really, really well. I have found that there's a lot of people out there just like me. The thing is, we don't discriminate against any path of recovery. It's all inclusive. In 2020, when COVID happened, we had a chance to really look down and reevaluate ourselves and figure out who is Recover Out Loud and what it is we really want to do. That's when we realized we were a recovery active community, meaning we do activities such as we have a softball team down in the CSA in Columbus where we wear our shirts proudly. It says Recover Out Loud right on it. We do recovery retreats all the time. We do cookouts, anything we can think of to get people together organically and create bonds and connections. That's also when we developed our RFIT program, which is a fitness program as a means to combat addiction. So when you watch the Addicts Wake, something I want you to pay attention to is in the part in Butler. The professor's up there, and she's talking about how addiction is a rewiring of the reward circuitry, where in the back of the brain is where addiction hijacks the brain, really darkening the prefrontal cortex. This is where the exercise program really comes into play, because exercise main focus, or this main influence, is on the prefrontal cortex of the brain, promoting learning and growing in the front, which if that is what darkens the brain during addiction, we believe that the recovery piece should include exercise. And we've done that, so we will do the RFIT program and then do the lesson afterwards, and our results have been very good. The main reason I wanted to be a part of the Addicts Wake documentary was to get this story out there, that really recovery, there's no one size fits all, the recovery path comes in many different forms. And getting our story out there and showing that and proving that has meant the world to me. And I really appreciate you, Lisa, for letting me do that, and that coffee that we had down at the grind. Best cup of coffee I ever had. I appreciate you letting me speak today, and I hope you look forward to hearing from Lisa.
Well, thank you, John. So I met Lisa Hall in 2020. It was actually at an event. A mutual friend had introduced us, and it was the last event I attended before COVID. So I was really pleased to see the film, Addicts Wake, at its premiere at the Heartland Film Festival. I know you've received accolades at the Sedona International Film Festival. And it really tells a really compelling story of the toll that the opioid epidemic has taken, not just in Indiana, but specifically in Brown County and in rural parts of Indiana. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I had to make that really hard call to Shelby, or I guess Shelby called me and said, "Hey, Doug saw you were premiering at Heartland Film Festival." And I had to say, "Shelby, Doug didn't make the cut of this film." He's on the floor. But we're going to get him back into the next edit. And Doug, I appreciate your partnership and your collaboration so much. In all seriousness, the Addicts Wake first version, feature-length film, became a story of community. And John was given just a few minutes to tell his story, but his story is extraordinary. And what he's done to get his life back is extraordinary. And it's just been pure pleasure and honor to be able to showcase that in a documentary film. We have more like John's stories. And the film got born out of my working with women in incarceration in Brown County. My husband and I moved there in 2017 from Indianapolis. I loved this small county feel where you could go and serve and help and really, really, really make a difference, because they were just so hungry for encouragement inside this correction center. And I started meeting ladies who really weren't a lot different from us ladies. They had families, they had jobs, they had dreams, goals, homes, and in a moment of dark time in their life, vulnerable time in their life, they made a decision to use what we now know are highly addictive drugs. And the drugs today, and I'm kind of getting to be an old girl, but the drugs today are not like the drugs of my day. The drugs today are so highly potent. The properties are so addictive. And it was done with intent, and we all know that. We're watching the repercussions of that. But as a result, we have a wake of pandemic drug use in this nation, and it's not going away. And we started filming in August of 2019. The pandemic came along, and I thought, oh no, I really felt called to make this film, and now we have this pandemic, what's gonna happen? Well, what happened is people went backwards because of isolation, because of not being able to get to recovery meetings that were so important for them to stay the path. It was vital. That was the word I was looking for. And so I did see that the timing was probably right for these stories because people were going so backwards in recovery. This film did premiere in October. We have been to Sedona. We've been to Hoosier Fest. We have been to Pittsburgh. But more importantly, we're in communities. And we're in communities because this is a community clarion call to say no matter where you are, take a look, inventory your resources, and how can we fight back? Whatever it is, but we have to get it out into the light so that we can start having impactful and meaningful conversations. And I've absolutely fallen in love with film because it does that. It can tell stories like no other medium can tell a story, and then we can foster these really impactful conversations. And so we're building groundswell in Indiana. We are going to be in 5 communities in September, along with Anthem Medicaid, who is sponsoring those showings. And then we hope to take it outside of Indiana, but we're gaining some traction here. And we heard the same stories in Arizona. You know, you can take Brown County, Indiana, and say it's Brown County, California, it's Brown County, Arizona, it's Brown County, Pittsburgh. This is a national crisis. And Doug, I wanted to mention this to you. There was an article this week in Fox News about another drug coming behind fentanyl. And it's got 3 times the power of fentanyl, which is 50 times more potent than heroin. And so we just cannot lay down, y'all, and accept this as our current society DNA. I refuse to do that. And as a result of that, I made a film with a great team, an experienced director, Michael Hussein, who's a fantastic storyteller. I had an incredible editor who works for our public PBS station here. And I think what you're gonna see in the film is that we humanize this issue. And these are our neighbors, they're our coworkers, they're our loved ones, could be our spouses, significant others. It just doesn't discriminate. So we need to develop this emotional awareness for this issue and figure out as communities. Senator Cook told me that. Lisa, this has to be a grassroots effort because big government isn't going to fix this. We all have to be a part of the solution. And so that's what this film is about. I think it's just a clarion call to communities to see how you can gather the resources, the people that are change makers, and fight back. So you're going to see a trailer that was actually filmed in December of 2019, and I will tell you, past that trailer, we have 100 hours of footage. And we knew that there was probably going to be an outcry for a different version, and so we are in process right now of filming a shorter version. The feature length it's a commitment. You're gonna need popcorn. It's an hour and 45 minutes. But the educational version will be somewhere between 45 and 50 minutes. And then we are also, after that, gonna be producing a law enforcement version. And I'm really excited about those that are coming, and I'm very excited to present the trailer to you today, and then we'll talk about it as soon as you see it.
You walk through Brown County, it's like a Hallmark movie.
People like the idea of Norman Rockwell, but that means you're making it look like everything's perfect when we all know things aren't perfect.
Addiction's about killing me, it's about beating me.
It's insidious.
and it's quiet.
I'm definitely an addict.
It will kill.
It was either this or death. That's where I was going. It was either this or death.
In the military, we don't cry. You know, it's like you just don't. And this thing has been, this is worse than going to Iraq. It's a war in Brown County. And I don't like losing. I don't like losing.
I've had students who have watched loved ones overdose. I've had students who have parents in jail. They're kind of caught in the crossfire, and many kids are aware of my experience.
You're always searching for the best stuff. Somebody could be selling really good stuff, but somebody could be selling stuff that just killed somebody, and you want the stuff that just killed somebody because it was that good.
There's no control. I lost part of my soul when I realized I was an addict. It changes you immediately and for life.
Ethan's a freshman in high school this year, and Landon's in 6th grade. Here I am missing out on that because now Dad's in jail.
When he went back into jail this last time, he seemed like he really didn't care anymore.
They were working on him, but they couldn't bring him back.
There's no way to explain what that feeling is to someone when you feel like a coward and you can't go in the room, and when you know. And he was gone.
He's in my heart. That's why he's in my heart. That's all I have.
I think that's the moment that really drove everything.
Do something. People need to start doing something. We can't keep talking about it. Can't just keep complaining about it. We can't tell everybody how to fix it. We need to start doing something.
I've only been clean for 9 months now, but I made a promise to myself and to God.
It's nice to be able to come back, man, and see everybody.
I can't do it alone, but I wasn't going to do it no more.
And we're seeing some success.
I think that we have something to share. I think people will be knocking on our door and wanting to see what's going on here.
That's why he's not in there. But yeah, this idyllic little community is not unlike some other beautiful little communities in our state. And underneath, we're very sick and addicted. And so this film is just an encouragement to stay the fight, stay in the game. We cannot give in into substance use disorder. It's decimating our country, our healthcare system. And so that is why the film was made. And I am pleased to tell you that you will all get a link emailed out after your meeting today, and you will have a week to watch the film, and that's compliments of Doug and his team. And so thank you for sharing that with them. And so if you don't have time within a week to watch it, just email me, and I'll extend the link for you because I want you to see it. And I want you to see what we're trying to do through film. So I'd answer any questions now if you had any, and if not, I'm happy to.
Lisa,
yes.
Lisa, it's extraordinary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Secondly, if you had to categorize where we are now versus where we were in 2012, where do you think we as a society are associated with opioids?
It's a really good question.
It's a hard question, though.
And I wasn't as aware of the issue in 2012 as I am today. And obviously, I've had to familiarize myself and educate myself in a way that I wasn't in 2012. But I have talked to so many people who lost kiddos in 2012. And so I think we are ahead of the game in terms of awareness. I think we are ahead of the game in terms of resources and treatment centers, but we're not even close to having enough to take care. And I think, you know, we've got to really strengthen our preventative message, and that's what we hope the educational version will help to do once we get it into schools, because we don't want the future generations having to go down this path.
Would the do something be awareness?
Do something is awareness. ROL is doing a great job of awareness. In fact, when I met John in that little coffee shop in Brown County, they were just forming, had just applied for their 501c3, and when I think back about what's happened with this organization and the awareness that has come to Bartholomew County has been extraordinary. And I feel like a proud mama of John and Megan, because they have done so much hard work, and it has been completely grassroots. And they are making a difference. Do something in Brown County is making a difference. And there's nothing that can keep other small counties, large counties, Indianapolis, Marion County, from doing these kinds of things, having these kinds of initiatives. So that's what we hope it'll inspire. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you. Question I have for you, my work as a judge, one of the things that I've observed as a barrier to long-term recovery, I think, I've seen it in our county, and I've heard anecdotally in other places as well, and I'm sure it's occurring, but barriers such as community involvement, community engagement. It's one thing for people to go and see a film or listen to committees and to say, yes, we want treatment, we want people to get help, but when the opportunity for transitional housing, for example, lands in your neighborhood or within your eye shot or within earshot, people show up in droves at zoning meetings to oppose those kinds of opportunities. I know in our county, for example, we had a young man who struggled and got himself back on the right path, started a men's recovery house by purchasing a house on his own, and is doing very good work there, and attempted to start a transitional house for females, and got shut down through the zoning process because people opposed it. So I'm just curious, based upon your work, what you observed, if anything, similar to that in Brown County, and how they overcome that.
I think people oppose what they don't know and understand. And that is what the biggest thing, and John, you could probably attest to that we're here. I mean, I look at John and Megan right now. Wouldn't it be a shame if John were still in prison because of what he is contributing to the recovery of others and how he is inspiring and leading, and he and Megan as a couple are now doing that. I mean, I think about if he had gotten 30 years, what we would be missing out. And so I think that what the film does is it brings humanity to people that are trapped in addiction. It humanizes them in a way where it's easy to say, well, we don't want those kind of people living in our neighborhood. Well, those kind of people were one time Megan and John. And Corey and Michelle's son, who you'll hear about in the movie. You know, Corey's a pastor, Michelle's a 4th grade teacher. So those kind of people are all our people. And that is the awareness, that's the banner we have to carry forward, that we want hope and health and recovery for these folks. Is it risky? Sure. But really right now with the way our society functions, there's a lot of risk in a lot of areas. So I would want this film to be shown to that group in a zoning meeting and say, look, these are human beings we're talking about with great potential who got derailed for whatever reason. And yes, the first time was their choice, but right now with the properties of these drugs, it takes less than a week of using heroin or meth for an entire week to have your body become fully addicted. And that in part is due to the cutting with fentanyl, and that's why we're seeing so many deaths. So back to your question, the death rate is going to be much greater. This is about to get more deadly with all the fentanyl coming in. That has a difference from 2012. But so we have to view people that are struggling as human beings, and I hope that you'll agree with me. That's what the film does.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I will say, as someone who's a prolific, writer to zoning boards, it's about a 50-50 win-lose. with zoning commissions all across the state as we try to, whether it's treatment or recovery housing, the more a community is engaged, the less opposition.
Mhm.
So it's encouraging, and it's all sizes. I mean, Justin Phillips is here. She just opened a women's recovery house in south of Broad Ripple neighborhood, and she went up against some considerable opposition from her neighbors. Not the neighborhood association, but some individual neighbors, and the zoning board was courageous enough to make the right decision, but that's not always the case.
I think one of the things that's come out of the awareness is that jail is not the spot, right? Jail is, generally speaking, is not the place.
It is the place where recovery begins.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and it's not in someone's best interest to keep someone in there for 30 years. You are absolutely correct. But the law enforcement version, and why that's going to be so necessary, is to help sheriffs and their staff to understand what role they can play in getting somebody along. Because right now with our system, they are going to spend time in incarceration. So while they're there, why don't you want to help somebody? I mean, we can take things in there right now to help law enforcement, help people start and really pursue a life of recovery while they're in there sobering up. And so it's not long-term the place, but man, we got to equip our law enforcement with be able to help them to also reduce recidivism. That's a hard word for me to say. It's always been a hard word. Don't ask me to spell it, I can't. So anyway, thank you for all the work you all do. I thank you for your interest in this. Love to hear from you after you have a chance to watch the film. If any of you have a group that you want to screen it to, my contact information, I'm going to leave some cards today,
Okay.
Doug, and my contact information is on that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa. And Shelby will send out the link. We'll make sure Lisa's contact information is included. You will have through August 11th at 11 p.m. to screen the film. So our next speaker, everyone I believe knows, she's a frequent flyer here. Rebecca Buhner is the Deputy Director of Addiction and Forensic Treatment at the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. And she is going to talk to us, give us an update on the State Opioid Response Grant from SAMHSA number 3.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Hunsinger. It's a great opportunity to be with you here today, and I'm excited. There we go. There I am. Okay. As Doug said, my name is Becky Buhner, and I'm with the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. And I oversee the addiction team as well as the State Opioid Treatment Authority. So today I'm going to give you an overview. Hopefully you all are familiar with the term State Opioid Response Grant. And we have had several iterations of this. This is, as Mr. Hunsinger mentioned, the third. And this is from SAMHSA. And as you can see, the main goals for SAMHSA related to this grant are to increasing access to FDA-approved medications for the treatment of opiate use disorder, supporting the continuum of care for opiate use disorder and stimulant use disorder. So I want to note that stimulants, that was something that was added during the second round of funding, and they have continued that in this round. So we're very excited to know that, because as we know in the state of Indiana, stimulant use disorder is a huge challenge for many of our areas. And then also harm reduction, as you will see, is something that they have added in this third round. So we are excited to see the opportunity to expand some of our harm reduction efforts. And then just in general to help reduce the unmet treatment needs for individuals. So as far as Indiana, our grant goals are to increase access to evidence-based treatment and recovery resources for people with opiate use disorder and stimulant use disorder. And also decrease the number of drug overdose deaths in the state by 10%. We've already talked about today and mentioned the fact that fentanyl is big right now, and there runs the risk of overdose going up as a result of that, and so this is one of our huge priorities. And then also understanding that we can't do this without a workforce. And so one of our big priorities is to continue to work on increasing our addiction workforce and our professionals working with opiate use disorder. Our total budget for this grant is just over $29 million. As you will see, we've broken it down into just some high-level categories for you here today. Hopefully you all have, at one point in time, passed a billboard on the interstate or seen a commercial about the Know the Facts campaign, and so we're going to continue that stigma reduction campaign. And then also, as it relates to infrastructure, we are going to be expanding some of our efforts. We have done a significant amount of training on evidence-based practices over the past few grants. And so one of the areas that we've recognized is that oftentimes the providers, they are able to send their folks to training and they get trained in an evidence-based practice, but then the ongoing expense related to fidelity monitoring and ongoing supervision and just maintaining that evidence-based practice can be cumbersome. So we're going to provide some funds to Indiana University. They're in a prime spot to support some fidelity monitoring and infrastructure development so that our providers can rely on them as a resource for that fidelity monitoring. And then the other area is we have done a lot of work around our recovery community organizations over the past several years. And what we have recognized is that individuals such as John are working in the field as a peer support and building these recovery community organizations, and at the same time would need some help or some support with how do you run a business? What are HR rules? What does it mean to do a budget? What is it like to hire and hopefully not, but to fire? How do you manage all of those processes? And so what we are going to be doing is offering a procurement opportunity for one of our universities or academies in the state to help build a education and training forum that will turn into a certificate that our recovery community organization leadership as well as recovery housing leadership can achieve, and then hopefully help them to build and sustain more effective recovery community organizations. So for the next line items, I'm going to break out a few of our programs that I want to highlight. Hopefully, and again, some of these are things that you have heard before. We are going to continue to support our mobile integrated response systems. There are 11 in our state that cover 30 counties. And the goal of these mobile response teams, as you will see, is to meet the individual in the location of need. So wherever that may be, if that's a jail, an emergency department, a homeless shelter, the peer can go there and meet them at that place. And then these response systems, they have at least one licensed clinician and one certified peer recovery coach, with the option, depending on that community and what their needs are, of adding a prescriber, a paramedic, or a law enforcement first responder. And then they will be required, or they are required, to have some type of cooperation. Typically that is referred to as a memorandum of understanding or some type of contract with a local emergency department that allows for emergency department induction of buprenorphine. So they have to have a data waiver present to help that person get that induction onto a medication for opiate use disorder. And then they have to have a connection with the follow-up service provider so that if they, within their system, don't have access to ongoing services, they can refer them out for additional services. Part of the expansion with this next round of funding is we are going to do an evaluation to look at the impact that these MERS have had, not only on their community, but on the individuals and the people that they're serving. We've served just under 8,000 individuals in these teams since January of 2018 when we started. And so for those of you that are familiar with SAMHSA grants, one of the not so exciting aspects of them is having to collect GPRA data, which is a government performance review data. And I'm very proud of our team at DMHA because what they have done is they have taken this opportunity to collect the GPRA data, which can be a 30-some page data review and question set that takes a while, and turned it into reports back to these communities. So in these areas where we have the mobile response teams, they are combining this, going in and pulling the data from their GIPRA, and they are reporting it back on a quarterly basis. So they have actually used this often challenging time of collecting all this data into an information and reporting back for these communities. And what I'm excited to share with you today is just a few of these, but overall what it's showing is that the work that they're doing is moving us in the right direction. And so as you will see from this first one, this is based on some national outcome measures, and this looks at abstinence and housing stability, so whether or not a person had a place to lay their head, not just couch surfing or living in their car, and then whether or not they had employment or some type of education type programming. And so the blue is where they were at intake, and so intake happens within the first few days of meeting with that individual, and then the 6-month follow-up happens anywhere from 5 to 8 months after that initial intake. So the total number of individuals that we reviewed and have in this data is 580. So you'll notice it's significantly less than the over 7,000 that we have served. However, we needed folks to be in it for 6 months and to maintain the treatment. And so that is why that number is so much smaller. So as you will see, for abstinence, for example, individuals upon intake reported use of alcohol in the past 30 days. And then in that green at the 6-month follow-up, there were fewer that reported use of illegal drugs or alcohol in those 30 days. And so again, this shows where we have more housing stability, and then more folks are enrolled in education programs or gainfully employed. When you look at the mental health outcomes, again, the blue is the intake, the green is the 6-month follow-up, and this is showing that at intake, individuals reporting increased anxiety, experience more serious depression, more trouble concentrating, and more trouble controlling violent behaviors than at the follow-up report. And remembering that peers are meeting individuals where that location of need is, and oftentimes when people come into treatment, there is increased anxiety, they're not having that best day of their life, right? So we do expect to see some improvements, but again, I think these are significant for the work that they're doing. And then quality of life, while these are not as drastically different, when you think about someone assessing that they have very good or very satisfied, those are high expectations. So I believe that seeing any type of progress on the quality of life is positive and going in the direction that we want for our teams. As it relates to recovery, we are going to continue to support our regional recovery hubs. There are 20 regional hubs operating across the state, and this is a partnership with the Indiana Recovery Network, which is an affiliate of Mental Health America of Indiana. Each hub is a recovery community organization that manages peer recovery services for other affiliated peer supports in their region. Their organizations, they offer peer support services themselves to help with folks that have opiate use disorder or stimulant use disorder. And they can be accessed 24/7, and they are available statewide. They can conduct a significant amount of outreach. So when we talk about addressing the stigma, just by the nature of these folks existing in their communities, they are doing some of that. And I just want to note that in the month of June alone, our recovery hubs provided over 12,000 services to individuals in our state. As we go into workforce and education and training, we are going to continue to work with Community Health Network Foundation and the Behavioral Health Academy. The goal is to better align educational curriculum and practicum experience for behavioral health workers and students. This work started in October of 2020 with the SOR Grant 1. Students from several local universities will be able to apply for coursework and direct service experience at local community mental health centers. They will receive supervision and additional education through the program. Stipends are given to the students at the successful completion of the first semester and then again at the second semester. And the stipends help to encourage student engagement in the program. and they help to offset the financial burden for students when going to school and doing a practicum. The goal is that investing more into students during their schooling and training, the stipends, things like that, will assist in their transition to employment at organizations and for faster onboarding, and also help to retain individuals for a year to come and help with that burnout. So far, we have had 63 students go through this program so far, and then with the goal of this next year to have an additional 55. And part of the Behavioral Health Academy's work will include expanding its relationships with more universities to increase participation, foster stronger ties between academic institutions and providers in our state. They're also going to help provide some trainings on evidence-based practices like cognitive behavioral therapy and contingency management, as well as or working with folks the community mental health centers that are involved in the program. So Indiana OUD Echo. Echo is the extension for community healthcare outcomes. This was originally developed years ago at the University of New Mexico, and it's a hub and spoke network that is led by an expert team who conducts virtual clinics and learning sessions for community providers. The Indiana Opioid Use Disorder Echo is a program that was implemented by the Indiana School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry, and we started this with our SOR funds in 2018. Since that time, we have offered 318 sessions with over 6,000 participants. It's 6,889 participants so far. To date, we have 9 tracks. The prescriber dispenser track, which is for providers that offer medication for opiate use disorder. This track is unique in that it is offered weekly, so not just on a monthly basis. And then we have peer recovery, we have therapists and behavioral health, we have early home visitors, and so this is for healthcare workers, nurses, social workers who provide in-home care to families in the prenatal period. First responders, jail-based treatment. This has been another one that has been widely sought after, and it's for professionals from healthcare, community corrections, law enforcement, the court, and other pertinent fields that are serving folks who are incarcerated or transitioning back into the community. And then we have emergency departments, medical comorbidities, and then the adolescent echo. So the tracks have varied in the number of sessions and overall duration. And some of the tracks have been offered multiple times. And so ideally, we will continue to offer these as we move forward. But again, this is something that ebbs and flows, and we change based on the need at the time. And I just want to note that one of the fantastic parts about the OUD Echo is that it has provided an infrastructure for other additional echo sessions to be built that are funded through other entities. So while this is something that we have supported as the infrastructure, other folks from FSSA as well as other state agencies, Department of Health, have used this infrastructure to expand the echo offerings. So I want to end with our naloxone, and I want to say that I am extremely proud of the work our state has done around naloxone. I have been to national conferences, and I've been on national calls, and I think that when you look at the states, we are at the top as far as who is doing it the best. And this is because of the infrastructure we have built in partnership with Overdose Lifeline. And so these are here a couple of pictures of our vending machines. There's 2 different sizes of vending machines depending on what fits in the area. We have placed these in jails, we've placed these in hospitals, in communities, and then we also have the Nalox box. And since we started, since March 2020, we have invested just under $9 million in our Naloxone. With this next iteration of SOR funding, we are committing another $5 million, so that'll be over the next 2 years. And we have distributed just under 190,000 doses of Naloxone around our state and placed around 300 Naloxone boxes with more to come. And then we have 10 vending machines that have been placed, with 3 more that are ready to be placed as soon as we get there, with a total eventually being around 19. The web address up there will take you to a map so you can see where these are placed. It's very simple to use. And then you can also order or request Naloxone through that same website. And then finally, I want to share with you a note that was left in one of the Naloxone boxes at the Muncie Folk Collective Naloxone box that kind of hit as, this is why we do what we do. So with that, if you have questions, I'm happy to take them.
Questions for Becky?
Quick question. Great. I'd like to remind us that this is where Echo and Naloxone distribution was discussed first at this table. So this is the fruits of our mutual labor, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Report. I mean, literally, Echo was right here. Bill Corley was sitting in the back of the room. Came forward and said, people ever heard of Echo? And I happened to be sitting in the building where the Echo classes were, but I didn't know what they did. So thank you for carrying that out. Expand a little bit on the recovery certification that you mentioned first, and you said you were looking for, it ought to be something of interest to one of the universities.
So one of the opportunities that we're going to be doing to expand the support for our recovery community organizations is putting out a procurement opportunity for a local university to develop a certificate program around running similar to running a nonprofit, right? So what are some of those foundational skills that someone would need to build and sustain a successful nonprofit? So we want to put that into a certificate program, very specific to our recovery community organizations and our recovery residences. Because what we've recognized and what some folks have said is, a couple of years ago, I was in prison, and now I'm running an organization, and depending on the day, I'm not sure if I'm doing things right. And so we want to help support them and build up their confidence, because they do know what they're doing, they are doing it right, but I think this will be a way to build that confidence and just put a little bit more support and help to build that network so that they have that ability to pull on those resources. When they have a question about HR, or when they have a question about how to do a budget, they have those resources they can pull from.
Yeah, we have a lot of providers who, or groups that want to be providers that could be vendors. They just need a little help to get over that hump. Maybe it's a little more sophistication. Maybe sometimes it's just base. They don't have the infrastructure to know how to hire someone. So providing them that, I think, will really be able to expand the number of contractors that we could provide funding to. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Becky. Next, we have Betsy Donardi, who is the co-chief counsel for the Complex Litigation Division at the Office of the Attorney General, who is going to give us an update, another update on the opioid settlement. I think we should just make you a permanent agenda item from now on.
Sure. Well, thank you. So today I wanted to talk to you about the current status of the settlement that involves the 3 large drug distributors, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal Health, and McKesson, and then also involves Janssen, which is a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. So those 2 are used interchangeably a lot about the settlement. And then I wanted to give you some updates on some other settlements or bankruptcy matters that are going on. So as I think my co-chief counsel, Mr. Voigt, explained at the last meeting, the state of Indiana achieved its goal of obtaining all of its subdivisions to join the settlement. And so we are going to receive the full amount of the settlement that what we were entitled to, which is approximately $507 million. We have received the first payment from the distributors. It is currently sitting in an account within the state. We have a second payment from the distributors that will be coming this year, and then we also have payments from Janssen that will be coming this year. And so the plan is to distribute all of that money at one time rather than distribute payments piecemeal. Because we were able to receive all of the subdivisions within the state sign on within the time period that was required under the settlement, we actually will receive accelerated payments from the Janssen settlement. So we will receive the first 5 years worth of payments from the Janssen settlement all this year. So we will be receiving a significantly larger sum of money in year 1 or year 2, depending on how you evaluate this, but in 2022, which is tremendous news, but also means that in 2023, the payments will be significantly less, and they will be significantly less in 2024, and in 2025, we will receive no payment from Janssen at all, so that money will only be the distributor payment. In year 6, so in 2026, we will get another payment from Janssen again. There is information on the Attorney General's website that lays out the estimated payment amounts for the full length of the settlement. So as you may recall, the distributor settlement is payments over 18 years, and although we are getting 2 years worth of payments this year, so then we will have the remaining years after that, and then the Janssen settlement is 11 years. We have also sent communication by email and by letter to each of the cities, counties, and towns in Indiana who are receiving payments, giving them their estimated payments for both 2022 and 2023, so that they can look at, for budgeting purposes, the amount they will receive this year compared to the amount next year, and don't plan a project that they don't have the funds to then cover next year. We're also within our office, and I think others would encourage communities to look to one another, to work together. If you're a smaller community, the amount of money you're receiving won't be as much as, say, maybe a larger community or your county will receive, and so you may want to work with them on utilizing the money that's received for those services. The money is all split, as you know, between an unrestricted amount that can be used for whatever purpose they would like to use it for within the community, and then the remaining money, the bulk of the money, has to be used for treatment, education, and prevention programs within your community. My personal opinion, not the Attorney General's opinion, is that I would encourage you to use all of the money that you receive for opioid treatment, education, and prevention programs, because that was the purpose of the litigation that we filed in the first instance. So if you have questions about the information that's on the website, the calculations, which include both the calculations for the subdivisions and the amount that the state will receive as well, please feel free to reach out to me or my co-director at the office, and we're happy to answer those questions. As to Purdue Pharma, which is a matter that is in bankruptcy, we had filed a lawsuit, and then the company went into bankruptcy. The bankruptcy is still on appeal in the Second Circuit. They heard oral argument back in April, and we're still waiting for a ruling. Our hope is that we get a ruling this year. Once there is a ruling from the Second Circuit, there are 2 potential options. One, it will go up to petition for cert with the U.S. Supreme Court, or it will go back to the bankruptcy court for, there will have to be a couple more hearings depending on what the Second Circuit decides, and then it will move forward from there. So at this point in time, we have no estimate as to when we may receive any money from the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy, but I'm hopeful that we'll at least hear from the Second Circuit this year. And then lastly, you may have seen that both Teva Pharmaceuticals and Allergan have announced that they have tentative agreements in principle to settle with the states. And so we are encouraged that those agreements will be finalized hopefully sometime later this year. The agreements are in principle on the monetary terms, but they have not yet resolved the injunctive terms, which are important for companies that are still selling opioids, to ensure that we're making sure that they're following the safeguards that we think are necessary in the sale and manufacture of those drugs. So they're working through, the states are working with those companies through those to resolve those terms. But I'm hopeful that those settlements will be resolved, you know, towards the end of this year, but we don't have a firm timeline at this point in time. We're just continuing to negotiate with them. Those two companies have announced that the settlement amount in principle is $9 billion for the states as a whole. That includes states that have already settled with them. So we have to work out the math on the numbers of what will be coming to states that had not previously settled with those two companies, and then the allocation to each of those states. So it's still a work in progress, but we're encouraged that the companies have announced those agreements in principle, and that hopefully those settlements will move forward and be resolved shortly. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to attempt to answer them.
I can't help myself. Betsy, great job.
Oh,
by the way, I was
thank you.
with the West Virginia AG the other day and his staff, and they were specifically talking about you and your
Oh, well, thank
division.
you.
No joke about the leadership in Indiana. As someone 74, 3 years old, 74, 73, I've been involved with the tobacco settlement most of my professional career. The Ryan White funds the last 30 years. Whatever you write, pretend like it's someone none of us know is going to be reading it 10 years from now, and make sure it's clear what your order of priority. So if you think you want somebody you don't know yet, the county commissioner of Jasper County, to read this thing in 10 years, really make it clear, because everybody spent the last 30 years trying to peel dollars away from the tobacco settlement to build bridges and stuff like that, right? I mean, so because the state budget does this, and the Ryan White funds, same sort of thing, and 304B and all that. So that's when the lawyering comes in. So we all sit around and say, gosh, why did we write it that way?
So by statute.
What was on our minds back then?
So by statute, we're required, we, the state, and the subdivisions are required to spend 70% of the money that is received on opioid treatment, education, and prevention programs. There is no, well, unless you want to violate the statute, there is no way to get around spending the money on those uses. And we have about 12-page document that lists out the approved uses. Those uses are vast. They range from, you know, medication-assisted treatment programs to jail programs to education programs and to prevention programs. There is we tried as a group of states to make them specific enough that you weren't using it on things that were not prevention programs or education programs, but also make it general enough that if the theories and practices related to opioid treatment change, that it will allow for that as well. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Bernice.
So quick question, and I'm on the website now,
Yes.
and it's fantastic, as well as your great work, so thank you. So I haven't found the 12-page document yet, but I'm just kind of curious, listening to Lisa, and I'm sorry, and Superintendent Carter's question about, you know, jail not being appropriate for people who are in addiction. I'm curious, do you envision or think that the dollars could be used to sort of reimagine not sending a person to jail who has, like, is there enough, like, if a community or communities banded together, would it be approved to sort of create just, you know, something different, whether hospital's too strong a word, I'm not, but some type of structure where people could go instead of incarceration, or would that be difficult to sustain if you use the funds that way?
So the funds can be used for capital improvements on, like, if you wanted to build a recovery house or transitional housing or things like that. There's no restriction on doing that, as long as whatever the program is that the building is being used for is an opioid use disorder related program. And I would add that the way that it is worded is it has to be an opioid use disorder related program. However, it can also provide services for co-occurring mental health disorders. So you can address both of those issues at the same time using the same housing and using that same funding. You don't have to limit, like some grants I know limit it, so you can use it for both.
So Bernice, and because I know through a lot of our conversations at JRAC, where you're headed with this, absolutely the funds could begin to support the infrastructure to help provide all those collaborations that need to take place. And we've had a couple communities that have even asked about beginning to do that. If they, you know, a lot of it is through that JRAC conversation, asking if they can begin to utilize those. So absolutely, there are a lot of uses. We also, both the Attorney General's page and our page sort of link to each other. We do have the 12-page document on our page as well, and we try to point our websites at each other when one has information the other one doesn't. So, any other questions? Betsy, have you had any further conversations on reporting requirements that might be required to go back to the settlement administrators?
Sure. So we've discussed that with, there are states that are on different committees related to the settlement, and I spoke with one of the states that's on that subcommittee, and they have not addressed that issue yet. It's an issue that they are working on. However, there are some states that have already created reports that they are planning to use for the reporting. So I will send those to you, Jug, so that you have them and can take a look at them. What my understanding is, though, is that the distributors and Janssen or Johnson & Johnson's concern is to, one, ensure that the money is being used for opioid treatment programs. However, they're not going to go through, from what I've heard, and look line by line and say, oh, well, Indiana should have used this for Naloxone instead of capital transitional housing building. And they want to ensure that we are not spending an excessive amount of the money for non-opioid programs. So the remainder of the portion of the settlement that's unrestricted is considered by those defendants, those companies, as money that is to repay the states and the communities for past expenses for opioid use disorder treatment and education. So, so those can be used, however, with reporting if you use it for payment of attorney's fees, because that has tax implications for those companies.
Great, well, thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you. Betsy, you and Corey have been just so helpful and so great to work with, so thank you for everything you do. Finally, we have Michael Ross from the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute to provide us on the update from ICGI.
Good morning. So just a couple updates for everybody on the status of the local coordinating councils. And for those of you that do not remember, local coordinating councils are the citizen-led and directed groups within our counties that focus on mitigating substance use-related issues in relation to prevention education, treatment intervention, and justice services and supports. And so they are provided with county dollars, and they have to co-equally dedicate money across those categories, 25% to each category of the funds that they receive. They receive typically small funds, but again, it varies by county. And we have a financial dashboard on our website, which we're happy for everybody to take a look at, because I think it does show the good work that they do with the small amounts of money that they have. So just a couple updates. So we, 2 years ago, started the process of overhauling the entire system, really providing a standardized process, a core set of days that they would report on. And we're happy to say again, and I said this last time, that we're at 90 functional local coordinating councils, and that's the first time it's been that number in quite a while. We expect by the end of the year to have our 2 remaining counties beginning the process of restarting as local coordinating councils, and that'd be Pulaski and Union. And we are seeing reporting occur at numbers that we'd like. So again, we had reporting occurring across all different periods of time, and we again standardized our calendar. We see reporting coming in at about 85% when our date occurs, and then about typically the remainder of that 15% is typically technical related issues in relation to our reporting system, not knowing how to fully start a report or complete a report. But within 5 days, we're seeing 100% of submissions occurring for our LCCs. And again, that's a big deal for us as we begin to try to look at this data. This year, we will have our end-of-year report available on our website and in dashboard form, which will look at the functionality of local coordinating councils. So do they exist in a capacity that's excellent? So the highest functioning coordinating councils satisfactory, so they're able to think about evidence-based interventions, they're able to think about how to use their funds, or needs improvement, so coalitions that could benefit from enhancing their internal infrastructure, rethinking the partners that are coming to the table, and trying to think through expanding the narrative within their community by expanding those partners. Finally, we are really excited now that we've moved out of this stabilizing phase and we're able to start really trying to enhance the work that they do and provide some advisement to them. So we are starting, and we started earlier this year, an advisory council, which is 16 local coordinating councils of various capacities. So some of our lower functioning and some of our higher functioning coordinating councils will be working with us to curate a structured framework so that if you're interested in funding something within prevention education, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're not going to tell you what evidence-based program to do, because our partners are putting together wonderful lists and have wonderful programs for that. We're going to help the LCCs deconstruct those concepts. So I'll use mental health first aid as an example. So the group would say within prevention education, gold standard would be mental health first aid, but that is a program that provides psychoeducation to members in the community, provides some form of triage, and then it provides connection to resources. So if you are looking for something to do with prevention education, that's what you would want to do, and then we'd link to all the other evidence-based programs that are provided out there. So we're excited about the direction that the local coordinating councils are moving. We're excited about the collaboration that's occurring amongst them at an organic level, particularly through the Coalition Resource Network. And so again, I think we're really just happy that it's stabilized and it's moving in a strong and positive direction.
Questions for Michael? Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for their time and attention today. Our next meeting will be Thursday, November 3rd at 10 a.m. here in the Indiana State Library. And of course, more details will come prior to the meeting. So thank you all for joining us, and we stand adjourned.